being a B2B marketer my whole entire life, there's a point in B2B scale where you want to bring in people with B2C experience because they just have the chops and they know all of the details on how to run certain kind of aspects. For me, it's paid performance for marketing.
This is You Should Talk To, a podcast for busy marketing leaders who are looking for support and tips on getting shit done. In each episode, Daniel Weiner interviews marketing leaders and discusses their experience, successes, and failures around hiring agencies. If you're interested in finding and choosing the right agency partner, then let's jump in.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the You Should Talk To podcast. I am your host. I am your sponsor. I am all the things. You Should Talk To pairs brands and marketers for free with vetted agencies and or freelancers for virtually any marketing or tech need because finding great partners is a pain in the ass. Super excited to be joined today by Jamie Walker, who is a friend, I think, at this point, but also EVP of Marketing at Keyfactor. Jamie, how are we?
We are certainly friends now, Daniel, but thank
That's
you.
good.
I'm doing well, and it's so nice to be here today.
Awesome. Let's jump right in. What is an unpopular opinion or a hot take of sorts that you have in the marketing world?
I have a lot of opinions, so
We've got the rest of the day. So lay it on me.
We could talk all day about that. I would say an unpopular opinion that I have currently is that brand drives demand. A lot of people say it's brand versus demand. And I truly believe that's not the case and one feeds the other. And I think traditionally, I think maybe 5-10 years ago, it was all about demand. I think even a lot of people still look at it, early stage companies that are growing, it's all about demand, but people want to have more of a positive experience. And that's where kind of brand and reputation comes in. And eventually you concede so much demand, right, from your systems and processes and strategies put in place, but people want to have something unique. And I think that's where kind of the brand element comes in, something that's memorable, something that is personable at the same time. And I think that's where like brand voice and tone and all those important aspects of brand come into place.
You're in good company. The last episode that I did was with Brian Law, who is CMO of ZoomInfo, billion-dollar company. A few people have heard of, I presume. And his whole thing, it wasn't exactly what you said, but it was about being distinctive. Like everybody tries to like differentiate, but he was like, you just need to stand out. Like nobody cares about like your different features and stuff like that. If you give that positive experience and leave people with a memorable experience with your brand in general. What's your 2 cents for a brand that doesn't have? I've heard of Keyfactor a ton. Being here in Atlanta and stuff like that. But what's your, I guess, advice if a brand doesn't have name power? Lean heavier into the experience?
Yeah. You have to lean heavier into the experience. And I think it's a little bit, depends on the type of company you work for, what stage growth you're at, because a lot of times marketing is very much measured on numbers. They're not necessarily measured on more of the high level metrics that brand is generally associated with. So one thing that I've always done, I would say being at Keyfactor is first of all, we heavily invest in our brand over the past 9 months here. So that was an active project that we had not kind of gone as deep into as far as brand voice and tone, mission and vision. So we have just kind of completed that. But before that, I would try to make sure that I was investing portions of our budget into making sure that we had more of the awareness kind of brand level messaging to support some of the demand campaigns. So I've always done that, but I'm again focusing on making sure that I'm meeting my demand metrics. If you're not meeting your demand metrics, it becomes very, very hard to vouch for why you should be spending money elsewhere. So
now I'm just curious. I know I didn't even mention this prior, but what's your thoughts on attribution? What you just said made me think. I'm like, I wonder if Jamie thinks it's all BS. I'm just curious.
I don't. And that could have been another unpopular opinion because most people think it's all BS, and I really don't. Here at Keyfactor, we have a pretty robust attribution model that we have built within Domo. So we're not even using more traditional marketing, I would say, tool sets to do that. So we use a BI tool, and we first started our attribution on kind of equally weighted channel distribution. We look at things over a very specific time period to look at influence on driving the opportunity. But man, I just kind of lost my thought a little bit. But multi-touch. But now we're into multi-touch, and we're actually looking at, we have so much conversion history that we were able to go and kind of evolve our model to actually look at the indicators of in the buyer journey where we were seeing the success. For us, it's 90 days before an opportunity based on our sales cycle. So I believe in it. It is what is our guiding principle to set quarterly targets against channel, to hold the team accountable. And for us, it's a system we've created that works well for us. It potentially couldn't work well for an organization, but it has not. Our attribution model has always led me to success, is what I will say.
That's great. To be clear, I don't think all attribution is BS. I think marketers that I talk to a lot are like obsessed and they forget sometimes to do the cool stuff. Like if you just immediately try to measure legitimately everything, oftentimes, I don't know, the creativity dies if you think you can't track something, or attribute
Yes.
it to a certain metric. But
Yeah.
you've spent the vast majority of your career on the B2B marketing side, the last few at Keyfactor. Talk a little bit about that journey and particularly like what's the biggest shift you've seen in the last couple years in terms of like consumer behavior?
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. So it's definitely been a journey to say the least, I think, for any marketer, whether it's a journey in a year or a journey in, 17 years. But
We had a
but
pandemic in there at some point
there's a
too.
whole bit that just the whole evolution of my time at Key Factor has been in pandemic, post pandemic, and now it's like post pandemic. So there's a lot of involvement. But before I was with Key Factor, I spent a lot of time in the healthcare IT space. And then I shifted more into the SaaS kind of for high growth companies. And I would say consumer behavior in general is completely different in healthcare ID than it is in the SaaS world. But if I were to isolate just kind of as I was sharing earlier, my time at Key Factor over the past 3 years, I would say it's the attention span that's lowering. And you'll hear people talk about this all the time. Attention span that people have. Everyone is so busy. Everyone's in a very connected world in general where we're getting stuff fed to us at any given moment that people want something new. They want to feel a new experience. And I think that's something that through the COVID era and then post, we've saw, people wanted a different experience from a virtual standpoint. And that was completely new to marketers. And we all, I think for the most part, we did a pretty great job figuring out how to do that. And the birth of new companies and new opportunities to kind of tag along was also a benefit for us. But now it's more along the lines of how do we create these micro experiences in person? So now that we're back in person, now it's all about what can we do to stand away from the crowd. So I guess to be a little distinctive against the masses, because we're in cybersecurity. We have main players in our space, but the sector it's becoming very noisy. So how can you differentiate yourself in a way that provides a positive experience that might not necessarily, and this is my caveat, be related to talking to the sales team right away. So you got to have that short-term game, midterm game, and long-term game. And those have to be different experiences that you measure in a different way. So
I
that's
think
what I would say. Try to get people's attention span in different ways, depending on where they're at and, how they want to be kind of associated with your business.
I think overall most companies I see suck at playing the game in general because to your point, they do like one thing and then they rush that like, oh, let's talk about a sale. And like they forget that like they
Yeah.
did a good job to get them interested and stuff. And then they just shove sales down their throat. And I think overall, like that's why I think it's hard at a company, truthfully. Like I have the luxury of being a one-person company, so I can think long term and
Yep.
for virtually everything that I want to. At a company with quotas and boards and stuff, I feel for them, but like I don't know how you can be successful like that if you are thinking, sure, like once we do one thing good, we have to get them to sales.
Yeah. I mean, that's just also your alignment with like your business leaders, your executives, and it's painting that vision. It's aligning on that vision. And so it's something we just have always done really well. We have great leadership over here. So being able to, I always speak, and even when I do kind of my strategic planning for the year, we have three different kind of subgroups of how goals fit into and how we're going to measure whether it's short-term success, long-term success. And that's how I speak about it. So just kind of laying the foundation for when you see these activities, this is what it's driving towards. And when you see these activities, basically a lot of our short-term things will go towards driving opportunities and long-term things about investing in accounts over time. So different tactics for different categories.
Sure. With economy in flux and, the dreaded R word coming up a bunch, what's your overall advice to other marketing leaders, VPs, CMOs, just how to get through this? Discretionary spending is potentially lower. People are maybe not looking at new things. What's the overall, your 2 cents there?
My 2 cents is always figure out how to focus on efficiency. And I know that's something that people say all the time, but being efficient with what you have, because I think in general, people aren't getting more, whether that's more budget or more resources. And if you're really lucky, which I feel really lucky, we have stagnant resources, but we're not getting a lot of more resources to be able to, and work within our high growth mode. So we still have to drive more results than we did last year, which means we need to just focus on what's working really well and continue to focusing on what's working well. And so a lot of times, and even me, like we talked about the creativity. Sometimes you want to be creative and experiment. And I think there's always a place for experimentation, but in a world we're in now where you want your team only focusing on the things that are driving the right result for the team and the business, then you have to be micro-focused. So for us, it's more about how are we getting the most out of our tools and systems? I know, I mean, maybe shameful to say that's not something we always had like the most,
Sure.
we were paying the most attention to, but these are the things as we're looking at everything we do. What is that return? How are we measuring it? Because we can look at things and aren't driving the value that we need now. And we stop doing those because it's just not a use of time. So really working on efficiency and spend, but also efficiency and resources are the things I talk about every single day.
It's a good time for an attribution model to work, you know?
Isn't it? I know, right? Because it leads you to the water.
We joked about having a martini together at 11 in the morning for this. And if we were going to do that, which we're not, this would be the portion now. We get to talk some shit about agencies, which is what I do most of the day. Overall opinion, because I know you got strong opinions and you've had a ton of
Yes.
experience with them. What's your overall opinion on agencies and how do they fit into the ecosystem of Keyfactor currently?
Yeah, I think my overall opinion on agencies is they're absolutely needed for any company that is in startup or scale up growth mode. You cannot back to efficiency. You drive efficiency when you work with efficient partners like agencies. So they're a big part of, I guess, they're extensions of our team here at Keyfactor. So we've had some success, we've had some failures. I think it's the nature of the game. But my thing has always been is work with agencies that specialize in something really, really great. And I truly do believe, and maybe this is another unpopular opinion, that the vision of let's find one agency to be our full service partner and they're going to do X, Y, Z. I just don't necessarily feel like that's the world in which marketing and agency usage falls into anymore. So I've
It's
always
hard.
been a proponent to it, although it's hard to manage. Like we have multiple agencies and consultants that we need to manage at scale so that they can drive the results that we expect from them. So you need to make sure that you have a person who's owning that they're building that relationship and that they are aligned on the goals and the outcomes. So they're a huge part of what we do here at Keyfactor. I'm more involved, I would say at this time, I'm more involved on being really in tune with our PR agency, just because we're looking at, as we've kind of revamped our brand and we're looking at expanding within our category. Those are the things that are a little bit more top of mind for me and making sure that I have strong alignment with basically we have multiple PR agencies globally that I want to make sure that everyone's kind of driving in line. So that's where I've been focusing a lot.
Sure. Most folks with your title that I chat with are getting hit up legitimately every 12 seconds. Is that the case for you? Agencies, vendors, all the things?
All the things every day. And I'm also one that if an SDR sent me a really great email I'm also like, because I always say I'm in the mind of a marketer at all times and any given moment of my day, I always think about the consumer behavior, but it's become a little like, I just ignore it. Like I ignore my phone, I ignore my email. And to this point now, even I have to say to people that I want to like, please call me, please text me, because it's just one of those things where there's so much noise that I've gotten almost tuned to completely blocking it out.
The good stuff gets lumped in with the bad because there's so much bad. So even good outreach gets hidden.
Yeah, but I'm also like, it goes down to when people are, prospecting me to look at, a tool or something that, my VP, then I'm kind of like, well, you should, don't you kind of have an idea of where I might be involved in that versus I'm not, my VP, that's who you should be talking to. But at the same time, if you can get your segments correct, you will definitely be able to get my ear.
So I'm
Good
curious
talk.
to that point, is there anything, if you're not in buying mode, is there anything somebody, particularly in the agency world, like that somebody can say in a cold outreach that, I don't know, interests you enough to take a call even when you're not in buying mode? You brought up PR. Could a PR agency send you something right now that would be so? I take the opinion usually not. Like, there's not a wrong answer, but I hear from most like, not really. I'm getting 700 messages a day. Like, until I'm in buying mode, it's just not going to
Not,
work.
yeah, not really. I mean, because not no, because at this point, if I'm not in buying mode, I don't have budget, then I already have, 3 meetings that are overbooked on my calendar that I'm trying to prioritize on any given day. So it just doesn't
That's what
necessarily
I'm here. That's what I'm here for. You're
make
like, Danny,
sense.
Danny, who do we hire? I'm like, hire these people.
I know, that's why we go to you. Where I'm like, "Okay, I need help, I need to streamline it," like, and, that's the other thing, where do I find my agencies? I find my agencies mostly through word of mouth, right? It's like I invest, some of the little time that I have into a couple different communities, and the communities become kinda trusted allies into we all have issues that are generally surrounding the same thing, and people are offering solutions. There's always, we're all solution oriented, so I think that's kind of how I found you. I had,
Okay.
someone had recommended we talk. We're both in Atlanta, so that's kind of where it all began.
You made an interesting point. You came to the dinner that I hosted a couple weeks back, which was split 10 B2B, 10 B2C marketing leaders in Atlanta. And I thought it was interesting. You just mentioned people having the same problems. And I found it interesting at that dinner, different companies, different verticals, B2B, B2C, significantly different stages of company, and everybody's dealing with the same shit. It sounded like, different
Everyone.
scales, truthfully, but like, I thought that was telling. A lot of like the folks I chatted with prior, they're like, oh, I've never been to a dinner that really mixed B2B and B2C, which I guess is just
I
not the
know.
norm. And yeah, it was interesting to hear that. Can you talk about that a little bit? Just even that experience?
Yeah. Well, first of all, that was the first time I had gone to an in person kind of executive style function in probably 2 years. But that's more on me and investing the time. So it was wonderful. I would say I was speaking mostly on the B2B. I was kind of surrounded by
Yeah, yeah.
other B2B CMOs. But for me, I'm always curious because B2C CMOs, yes, there's different levels of, problems that you're in the business, whether it's cutbacks or, budgets or whatever, buy-in, whatever it might be. But there's also like B2C. I'm always fascinated by listening to B2C marketing leaders because they're probably in a digital space that's so much more in depth than any B2B marketer, B2B CMO. So it's really interesting. Their consumer behavior and how they react has to be so much quicker, so much more relevant. And so, if anything, you should do another one maybe in like 6 months. And then,
I'm doing
and
one. I'm doing one in June, Jamie.
or you're doing what you're then I also found myself like I had wished that I had done a little bit more networking. So listening to them speak as we were going on the table was just fascinating to me. But now I'm like, man, I would just love to. For me, I always learn through kind of listening to others and just through experience myself and reading. But it's always great there's so much to learn, I think, from each side of the table.
Well, I think you have all their contact information. Everybody's been connecting behind the scenes. So truthfully, if you
I
reached
know.
out to any of them, I presume they would be happy to have coffee with you.
More coffee.
I know. Or the martinis, whatever you want to do.
Martinis, coffee,
Yeah.
wine.
I'm curious with when you are in buying mode and you're looking for agencies in
Yeah.
general, what are you looking for? Like, how can a vendor, you say you've roped in 5 agencies or 3 agencies or something and you have an initial chat. What are you looking for? Can they stand out during that process?
I don't know if this is unpopular, but for me, I always want to find an agency where we have share like the goals that I'm trying to achieve, that they can communicate their success via working with companies like us that are in a similar space. And so that's where the proof point comes in. So I also think it's valuable because a lot of agencies are small. I like when an agency, they'll always bring their founder or their CEO, but I also get a little bit more I like the visibility of someone who's gonna be working with me, like, kinda boots on ground and seeing how they operate. Because a lot of times, traditionally, if you go from a CEO sales cycle all the way to a whole other new team, then it feels like you're starting the relationship from scratch and you didn't build that trust. And so, I definitely look for the team on the other side that they bring to the table and how early do they bring those people in? Because that tells me a lot about the involvement and kinda just how they work, behind the scenes. As far as sticking out, I generally look to vet agencies that, again, proven past performance is a predictor of future behavior. I do my own kind of vetting behind the scenes too, and so a lot of times it's helpful if they recommend that I talk to a client. So it's not just a case study or PDF that is put over, then I can read about a success story. I can actually talk to someone. And not everyone does that. And I think that's more of a truthful proof point than anything than you could ever get when you're in the vetting process. So those are kind of the things that I look for. And again, making sure that transparency is another big thing. I'm a very, very direct person and I can see through anyone trying to sell me something. Give me FOMO though. Give me FOMO on that. I mean, that's probably the trick to selling to me is just make me feel like everyone else is doing it. So I want to do it. But no, jokes aside, transparency is really key. And you can see when someone's very genuine and transparent about their capabilities through a sales cycle, you're not just going through some standard pitch deck that isn't customized to your needs and what you're looking for.
It's funny, your episode, I think this will be 27 by the time it airs. And like, I get
Ooh.
such different answers split down the middle for certain things that you mentioned. The first one, I'm just curious because I know I look at it from a different lens of you being in it. There's two things you mentioned that I'm just curious. Like one was when they put you on the phone with clients, because my question to that is, what are they going to put you on the phone with? People who hate them? You know, like, of course they're going to sing their praises.
It's like a resume.
The thing on the first part, I'm curious, like, I talk about it a lot in particular with like performance marketing with folks. They're like, oh, and they like lay out what they want. And I'm like, that defines like 3 companies and it's your competitors. Like, do you want an agency that's worked with? And they're like, yeah, who've done the exact thing. And I'm like, genuinely, I want like platform experience as it pertains to performance marketing. And it just depends. I'm curious, is that some people really want it? Like when I'm talking to B2B, they want folks who have such specific experience. I think a lot of the stuff starts looking and feeling the same. Like if you're working with only call it like cybersecurity companies, I'm curious, like, do you feel you're not getting, to your point of like interacting with B2C marketers and stuff, do you feel you're not getting like a breadth of experience potentially from an agency if they only work with a particular vertical in a specific space?
Yeah, I think you and I would have to agree to disagree on that.
No, we can. That's good. I don't want
Yeah,
everybody to agree with me. That's a good thing.
I think it depends on your space. Cybersecurity, like, so we're in the digital identity space. So we're in a very small niche of it. We're on the identity and access management spectrum. So very small subset. So when it comes to targeting those people, it becomes a very niche thing. And so I do want people that, like, when I went to go, I think it's different on performance marketing than versus a PR agency. You want a PR agency that has a lot of
Who has the
deep,
connections.
wide
Yeah.
experience in cybersecurity because they know the reporters, they know the analysts, they know they know.
We agree
they
there. I'm with you there.
We have a footprint. On the digital performance side, I guess from my viewpoint, I
It
always
feels
want people with
safer.
experience.
Yeah, it feels safer.
I guess it
as
feels
well.
safer, but it's also, but I think the caveat to this, not just cybersecurity, it's a company that they've worked with it, they've scaled and they've grown
That's fair.
with. Because it's not just, okay, I mean, you could have another like company in an adjacent space in cyber that isn't growing, but doesn't help what I'm trying to achieve with working with an agency or a partner to support my growth goals. And so I think that's the other thing. I'm always a little bit of like, I like to look at, like, we're in the process of actually starting with a new paid agency for social. Very micro niche. And it's like, okay, before we were looking for someone that kind of did both segments and some advertising. Now we want just one thing because, luckily we hired someone with a really, really strong skill set that came from the agency background, which I will say, as being a B2B marketer my whole entire life, there's a point in B2B scale where you want to bring in people with B2C experience because they just have the chops and they know all of the details on how to run certain kind of aspects. For me, it's paid performance for marketing. But anyway, I went and I found them through a community, through a recommendation. And it was what their credibility, I think, to me, before my team got on the phone with them, was the companies that they worked with that I have seen grow in away from like their social footprint to over time. Like that's exactly what I want. And I've actually seen it proven through looking from a very, very open lens viewpoint that I have to their company because I'm not completely immersed in their company. But that's what I see me wanting Keyfactor to be. So they've already kind of proven that they clearly have doing something well to achieve those outcomes. And then when I back channel and I talk to their VP who said they're amazing, then it kind of already like again, word of mouth is what really sells these days. And it's,
I'm with
you
you.
know, a lot of people don't have a lot of time to, invest a lot of time, money. Cause again, you have to invest in an agency relationship from the vendor side just as much from the agency side for it to be successful. So
Yep.
now it's like time is money, right? For anyone.
Yeah.
Now it's
No,
really money. So,
I think the biggest interesting point, like, there's not a right or wrong. It's knowing your audience. Like, what you want is different
mhm.
from another VP, from another VP, from another CMO. And it's interesting. There was a thread on LinkedIn recently, and I hear it from other people as well that I help. You had mentioned, like, you like when multiple team members come to a call, which I am a
Yeah.
huge proponent of on the front end. I want you to think that they want your business as an agency, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
I hear the thread on LinkedIn was from a CMO. I can't remember where. I want to say it was B2B, but it was like, if an
Mhm.
agency brings multiple people to a first call, I assume they're bad at like resource allocation and they're like wasteful with time spending and stuff like that. And I was like, I think that's a
That's
bit
a
of a
viewpoint.
stretch. I
That's
know.
a viewpoint.
I do hear mixed. So I do hear like, oh, on the first call, sometimes like I had a recent thing where I introduced 3 agencies and one of them brought the 5 members of the executive team. They were really pumped about the opportunity. And the brand had mentioned something about like, oh, it felt like a little thirsty. I'm like, I'd rather thirsty than not prepared and like not
Wow.
acting like they want your business. It's a slippery slope. But yeah, to your point, like knowing your audience is crucial.
Yeah. I mean, well, I might have to agree. If you brought 5 executives to a paid performance intro call, then,
It
but
was
if you brought
a
your
big
account
brand with
manager and front
yeah.
lines people, then it changes a bit. So,
Yeah, I think with what I see with big brands and big logos, they get pitched so much that people
mhm.
want to stand out by showing how much they do care about potentially winning it. So I don't know. I have mixed feelings on that. I'll have to report back on that as I do this more.
Okay.
How do you think that
Yeah.
you get the best out of your agencies in general?
Well, again, my judge of if something's going well generally goes down to the goals that we set together and our ability to achieve them. So I think that the beginning part, as you, and this is more in the onboarding phase. I mean, we vet what metrics do you track? What are the sort of reports we're going to get, visibility, like you do all those things kind of in the sales cycle and make sure that you're aligned on do our systems match with each other or can we integrate together to be able to get the visibility we need. So then it becomes into setting the stage for what those goals are and what it takes to achieve those goals. And I think this is pretty standard stuff and getting any engagement, but it's also for a vendor, I always say the vendor has to kind of meet an agency halfway. So we need to educate the agency on our space, especially in the world I'm in now. It's not just cyber, it's the niche that Keyfactor's in specific. It's very, very technical sales cycle. It's not something that anyone, even when we hire people in the business, there's a learning curve to learn what Keyfactor does, to be able to sell it, to market, to write content about it. All of that is a learning curve. So imagine an agency who's only spending a fraction of that time to be able to drive the success you want. So we have to learn and share. So we have to provide that guidance and make sure that they have the understanding. So it means bringing time and resources potentially that aren't even part of paid performance to the table to make sure that we're doing our part by educating our agency what our buyers need, how they relate, what are our use cases, and where do we win. So they have an understanding at the highest level so that they can build programs that kind of feed into that. So I think there's definitely an education point, aligning on goals. And then for me, if for an agency to be successful, because I guess I'll take learnings from where I didn't feel like the relationship went that well was, oh, there's a lot of talk, but not a lot of action that follows them saying, okay, we're going to do this. And here's a lot of people have they build these strategic plans in their PowerPoints and they look beautiful. And then there's the reality of executing against those and making changes and making recommendations and having real time. And I think sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect between the vendor side and the agency side of how much should you be spending into, working on the account when you have 5 other accounts that you're in charge of. And so I think vendors always want more than they're probably paying for, but I think it's the agencies that at least keep top of mind and try to do the work that it takes to drive the program to be successful up front so that there's a lot of work up front. But if you do that right and you're aligned with the company, then I feel like that's what a vendor needs from the beginning. Because again, you're not hiring an FTE. There's a reason why you're using an agency to support this segment of your team. But you also want to make sure that they're working with you. You want to make sure there's a partnership there, and it's not just I think you should do this, but I'm not going to support you. And it becomes from just being really transparent about what the goals are and how we're going to get there.
You will get into the positive, negative experiences here in a sec. I'm curious, you alluded to it earlier in the beginning. I've seen a big shift, especially since COVID, a little before, probably because I
Yeah.
came from a small agency of call it quote unquote bigger, which is relative brands moving towards specialized agencies that do like one to two things really well. You
Yeah.
mentioned you guys are similar to that. I'm curious, is it like just to wrap your arms around it? Is it's worth it? It sounds like for you all in that context to have multiple specialists, even though it might take more to manage multiple partners.
Yeah, I think depending on the team. I mean, my team, there's the campaigns team that might need an agency to scale a certain aspect of campaigns. It's completely different than our needing a performance agency to run our PPC or paid social. So to me, it's more of using it within, like we even use consultants to add on to our for the high volume of campaigns that are going on compared to people. And so we use a lot of consultants and agencies to scale those. But as much as it is more, I assign people to manage those. I assign as part of their roles and responsibilities. Yeah, because you can't, it's also on that person who guides the agency. I don't want to say manages, they guide the agency to success. It's their job to do that. So I think there's a lot of, even when we have spend on marketing technology here, like someone owns it. Yes, marketing op owns it, but then there's another person or another team member that kind of owns the success of it. It's shared success within the tools, just like it's shared success within making sure that the agency partner is managed. So I'm definitely a proponent. We wouldn't be able to, we've been in 50% growth mode for the past 3 years. It's almost like hair on fire, crazy growth, but we wouldn't be able to do that with our partners, with our agency partners. We just absolutely would not be able to do that with just FTEs. So
I like the distinction you made too. I don't hear that often of guiding the agency versus managing. Semantic. I think that's actually a really good point. How to get it out of your agency is to not necessarily manage and mutually guide each other towards shared goals and success.
yeah, I think it's being like really, really open about your expectations. And so even just in leadership, like I always feel you guide and shepherd people's success in multiple different ways if you set the right objectives and you're transparent about what the outcomes. Because sometimes I can't just say I want this outcome and I'm not willing to at least educate and be part of shepherding, at least to a point where there's a handoff to be able to drive that. So I guess for better or for worse, I always take ownership I'm always the one that wants to start new things and new initiatives that I can't just say, okay, I want to do this. And okay, I want to do this. And then here's where I'm along so that the idea, kind of the expectations are set, we're aligned, and then it kind of takes off from there. Whether it's within my team or within an agency, I do believe that there's guiding that always needs to be done.
Sure. Fill me in on a positive agency experience you've had either at Keyfactor or previous, and what made it so positive or such a positive experience.
I would say I've had I guess I'm probably going to go I'm less in the paid side just because I'm not the one that has,
Yeah.
owned that through and through.
Any agency, any
Yeah.
service.
I guess a positive experience I've had is more on the PR side. And it's just, I have and I think it's why it's been so positive is I have a monthly or quarterly touch point with my basically SVP that's on the account on the agency side. And that person and I think our mindsets align very well to begin with on kind of like a no BS. There's a no BS. There's no sugarcoating. We will call a spade is like the epitome of what I believe at all times in my business and personal life. Because sometimes you need to sugarcoat something in order to not offend people, but then that just comes to be able to do it tactfully. But
That's why we get along, Jamie.
yeah, right. But I think that we have a touch point so that she can share. Like, it's important that I am a listener. You got to be a listener. You can't, I always take ownership for myself and our team and what we're bringing or not bringing into the table that's causing something to be great. So for this instance, there's, where I'm being receptive to how myself or my team can be better to even drive that because we're driving really great results. So it's a positive relationship because the money we're investing is going and it's driving the outcomes that we want. And now we're expanding with them and we're giving them more ownership of our program at a global scale. And so there's trust, and there's just trust that needs to be developed. And I think that trust has been developed and it's been a positive relationship because that SVP has really done a great job in just making sure that she's transparent on how we can be better. And I'm always in a game of how to win. Like, I think I have a very much of a winning mentality. So to have a winning mentality, you always have to understand where you can be better. And so I want people to always tell me where I can be better, where my team can be better, or where I can help drive more strategic alignment in the company. So we as a company can be better in this certain thing. And so I think without having transparency and directness out of those key relationships, I don't think that we would be where we are now. So it's being able to have those feedback loops that has been why the engagement has been just a success from the beginning. And I think we've been a year and a half, and everything is kind of up and to the right as far as, how we're working together to drive the outcomes that we need for Keyfactor.
I think it's interesting. I won't put you on the spot and directly ask it, but I had posted yesterday actually about like how, you can back channel, you can do all the things we talked about when hiring an agency. You can look at case studies, all the things, but ultimately it just comes down to who do you trust, right? And it's usually like one person or a couple people who you trust to do what they say because a team's executing and that's your person, And I hear most of that from people like, when people change agencies, oftentimes it is like, to your point, which is why I won't directly ask you, like that SVP, like, oh, they left. And yeah, everything just changed, which is why, like, I don't know if it's an unpopular opinion to me. Like, I don't think any agency is quote unquote the best. There's better for you in specific situations, but it's people and process for everything. Like the people you're working with, the people you trust. Like if that person, if they decided to move on somewhere in their career, like your experience doesn't necessarily change for the worse, but it changes 100%. Maybe there's somebody who's better or the exact same, right? But like, I think people or agencies I talk to, new ones, when I'm vetting them oftentimes, they over-index for the actual work, which is my unpopular opinion. Like they tell me about how good these results. I'm like, if I can't have a normal conversation with you, you think I'm going to put you on the phone with a client, like, or a prospect, like that's what I'm thinking in the back of my head half the time. Like, man, Jamie would hate this person, or like they wouldn't get along. Personality, you don't get good work out of people you don't mesh well with. And to your point, you said you all are on the same, wavelength, and you think the same, and you're honest with each other. Like all of those things are how you get to the really good work. So
yeah, I mean, trust is, if there's no trust, you're not going to get very far with, I don't want to say anything, but with a lot of things in life.
When people are evaluating multiple agencies and they get to the end and they can't make the like they're not 100% sold in one direction, I'm usually like, who do you trust to pick up the phone at like 8:00 at night on a Friday? If I also believe there's presumably usually no marketing emergencies, but I don't know, let's call it an e-commerce thing and the website goes down or something crazy
It could be an emergency. Yes.
100%. Who do you trust to pick up the phone? If you shoot them a text and say this thing occurred and our business is in trouble, like who do you trust to get back to you and not say, we'll hit you up on Monday,
Yeah. And now that after saying that, I think about the vetting process because, finding a PR agency is no slow process. I will tell you that, especially at the scale we were looking for. But there were parts when we were going through that phase where I was like, we had some really great candidates. Like even to this day, I'm like, oh, they would have probably been great to work with. But there was something about the one we chose and I think it was the transparency through the process of like, this is what we do and this is what we do well. If a lot of people will say this, if this is what you're looking, this is what we don't do. Being very clear about what you don't do is also, to me, very valuable, and it sets the expectations early and on. And so it's been very much like, I think back to almost 2 years ago when we first met them, that what they said is their word. And it's exactly how they work with them and exactly what you can expect. And
that's great.
And especially in that form, it's like, they're interacting with my CEO. They're interacting with like very high level executives here. I also need to make sure that those personalities are a good fit and the expectations, how they work together. I can build the trust in the beginning, but they have to build that next kind of length of trust. That's more in the PR world. I would say the digital world, you're not going to be talking to the CEO. So it's a little bit different.
Yeah. Talk me through a negative.
And if you are,
yeah, maybe you've done something right if you got the CEO. Yeah. Fill me in on the negative side. We'll try not to cry here.
Oh, the negative side is just overpromise, underdeliver, changing people on the account. So some of the times it's like, that happens and I get it. But I think when you are looking
that's a them problem, not a you problem.
Yeah,
would be my answer.
I know. if you're looking for like generally you're hiring an agency for scale, or you're hiring an agency because you don't have that talent or that direction internally to be able to guide, but you can't just ignore it. So I would say earlier on when we were looking for someone, we just didn't have someone in-house to be able to guide that, to be the smartest person in that kind of specific area. I needed to lean to an agency in order to be that person. And so where it hasn't worked out is when they have very junior. And again, I don't know if there's anyone, there's just very junior people that are learning, and it's great. I always want to like help and learn and grow people in their careers. But sometimes when you're working in a company that I need you to be moving as quick as we're moving or else
Sure.
it's isn't going to work. And so that's generally what's more about the person that's running and not just managing the account, but actually managing the program, like tactically manage the program. When that person is as well versed and they're trying to overcompensate it for just saying all these words and coming up with all these plans to fix it, but it's not working, that's generally when I feel like I get to the place where I'm saying, I never feel like I'm the smartest person in the room ever. And I never generally want to be the smartest person. I always want to learn and grow. But if my spidey senses are telling me something's off, I guarantee, Daniel, I mean, I've been around the block long enough. When the spidey
I
senses and your gut intuition is telling you something's not right, it's
I
generally not
wouldn't
right.
dream of Jamie. You scared the shit out of me. I wouldn't dream of messing. I wouldn't even dream of trying to sugarcoat or bullshit something past you.
God, I'm not scary.
You're not actually scary, but
Not
you
actually.
command a room. I wouldn't mess with you. The question to that though, which is my favorite question of this podcast, honest answer, please. Can once the seed of doubt has been sown, can a negative agency scenario be salvaged?
Only if it Ah, there's the optimistic hat coming on. I mean, I think anything there's some things that are I would say maybe 9 times out of 10, and that one time, that 10% of the time, I would say is when they can salvage it quickly. Because generally when things are going south, I'm always willing, like, just with anything, give people a chance, give a chance to prove themselves. If they can salvage it and show outcomes quickly, then yes, I truly do believe that it's salvageable, but I just haven't seen that happen really ever.
That's fair. What is the biggest thing you think agencies get wrong, or something you wish they got right more times than not?
I don't know. I would say, again, I just hate when agencies try to sell me for full services because I just don't, where I'm at with the company I'm with and what we need, I just don't think it's full service, even though I know that's great to go cast a wide net and, try to get as much business as you can. But I think so people, when they go too far umbrella, are a little too much. Just like, I mean, I recently hired a brand agency when we were going through this brand project, and it was someone trying to sell me this and then this and this. And I ended up, and again, it's very niche. I want someone who's done just this really, really well. Hopefully, where it's not too ungodly expensive, but sometimes when you really want something and you want it to be done well, I mean, there's value in spending the money to get the result that you want. So, I guess a long way of saying, Daniel, my answer is, I think they get it wrong when they try to sell the whole kit and caboodle.
I like that answer. What are you most excited about or bullish on in the marketing space? You mentioned in-person events coming back, artificial intelligence is taking over universe. Apparently, we're all
The
out of jobs
universe.
tomorrow. What are you
I
most
know that's
excited
it.
about?
I'm excited. I don't, I agree that artificial intelligence probably will eliminate jobs. We're seeing it all over the place, right? Big companies are already eliminating jobs, just from the use of AI. But again, it goes back to the beginning when I was talking about efficiency. So I'm super, I guess, bullish on how to get my team to drive more efficiency by educating them, or providing, like I've actually was thinking about this, over the past week, because I think I was on a community coffee talk about bringing in someone to kind of teach my team, like, here are these different tools you should be doing to maximize your output, I guess. Because again, I mean, we're in a scale up mode. It's a really high output, and everyone's working really hard, and they're just trying to get people to work more efficiently, so they're not stressed and not kind of burnt out. And that's, I think, a constant challenge that any marketing leader has, is managing to outcomes, but also managing through stress and anxiety that just kind of a lot of people are experiencing in the world today.
Lead perfectly into my final work-related question of what keeps you up from my marketing or business standpoint at night.
Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm always wanting to be one step ahead. And I think the mentality of being one step ahead is becoming a little bit more harder because you're just trying to do more with less. And so I think
Also,
it's just goes,
it's also impossible
I
most
know,
of the
but
time.
I think I always,
Probably
I
not
always,
healthy as well. Yeah.
no, I always say my habits might not be healthy for everyone. But I don't know. It's just, we're in interesting times, I'd say, in the market. There's a lot of, companies where, a lot of companies are, reversing versus moving forward, and we're trying to just keep the same momentum. And it just comes down to the efficiency piece. It's like maintaining efficiency and maintaining, for us, it's scale. We have to maintain scale and growth with the same amount, that we had before when our, the growth numbers were smaller. So I think those are the things. It's just I always care about people's well-being, as anyone on my team, as employees, as people. And so I'd say that's where my more emotional side of my personality kind of leans in more, and what probably keeps me up, and just making sure I want to keep people happy, motivated, and positive. And sometimes that can be challenging.
I know some of your employees, and they've always told me good things. So unless they're lying to
Well,
me,
that's
I've
good.
never
That's
heard anything
good.
bad. So,
That's good.
well, yeah. I hope you have boundaries in some capacity. I have terrible boundaries, but I
Mm,
hope you're at least
yeah.
sleeping well at night. But we'll finish with a couple fun ones. What was your very, very, very first job?
Door-to-door insurance sales in
Yes.
rural Vermont.
How did that go? Is that why you're such a good salesperson now?
Well, I'm not a really good salesperson. I'm just really good
What are you
at
talking about? You're a world-class
making
marketer. That's
people
a good salesperson.
well, I'm good at influence. I'm good at
Okay,
influence.
there you go.
But I'm not good at asking for the money. I'm not good at asking for
No?
money. But
Okay. That's the fun
if
part.
I think if I was really good in sales, I'd probably be in sales.
I intertwine marketing and sales. Truthfully, we're all selling something. So
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, door-to-door sales for
okay,
18 months, and then I transitioned into marketing.
okay, that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
What would your final meal be?
A bottle of wine, probably. I don't
You,
know.
you,
Or like a bloomin' onion from the Outback, something
a
random.
bloomin' onion, Jamie? You've got one meal
Huh?
left, and you chose a bloomin' onion
Yeah.
and a
Yep.
bottle of wine. I like that. That's a hell of an
I
answer.
there's just some things like I even know my husband, he's just whenever like at Outback Steakhouse, it's like the most like traditional chain food restaurant. Well,
Maybe
this
I can get
day,
Outback to sponsor this episode. I'm gonna reach
I
out
know,
to them. I
right?
got a good
You guys
excuse.
now I feel a little embarrassed, but whatever. I love a good Outback bloomin' onion with a salad any day.
We are not here to food shame. I was just
Mhm.
expecting something a little, I don't know. I figured more items maybe other than the bloomin' onion. You don't even want the steak with it, just the bloomin' onion. You're just having a quick snack and
No.
then you're out. Okay.
Well, you can't go
Hey.
to the Outback and go to get steak. You go to the Outback to get a good bloomin' onion only. Like you go to a really good steakhouse to get a good steak. So you
Okay.
can't have it all. Just like agencies can't sell the full service, you got to go for exactly what you like at the restaurant.
What a way to close it out and tie it to food. My final question. Who is somebody who inspires you personally or professionally and why?
Mm. One person? I mean, I feel like I'm inspired by lots of people, but
You can reel a couple. You can reel a couple off. This is my podcast. I make the rules.
yeah, that's true. I think two that come to mind. I think Serena Williams is always just someone. Again, my daughter's a tennis player, and we're kind of growing into some. I travel a lot too, so I'm always watching lots of movies on my Delta flights. But I don't know, she's just inspiring from her passion and her grit to succeed through obstacles. And so I watched a few of her documentaries over the past couple years, and just someone my daughter idolizes, and just someone who's been a little bit more front and center with us. So I'd say her is just like a strong professional athlete in a challenging world that she's not. I would say, she's unique in herself. So I've just loved her journey. I think professionally, I had the opportunity about a month ago to meet Ginni Rometty from the ex CEO and chairman of IBM. I met her in person, and I was followed her on LinkedIn for 2 years prior to that, just kind of watching her growing, and just kind of, she was this interesting person I always saw. And to meet her in person, and I'm reading her book, Good Power, right now. And it's more like her story, her success. And I think just the aura around her, and watching her and talking with her husband was mind blowing to me, as far as like how someone can have so much power in general as a human. If you read her book, she talks a lot about doing things that could be controversial, like making the hard decisions. And I feel like I'm always aligned myself with like have a strong heart, but I'm always from a bit things that could cause controversy, but for the better good. Or, you know, I've always say like call a spade a spade. If something's not going well, make sure you dissect it, make sure you change it. And I think a lot of people are, scared to make change, especially when they're in high level positions. And just, I'm in the beginning stages of reading her book, but to me, she's very inspiring. And being a female leader in a male dominated world, what can I say? That's just what it is.
That's awesome. Maybe I gave a coffee table book at my dinner. Maybe I'll give her book at the next dinner, which I won't invite you to unless it's in 6 months. So
it's in 6 months. We got the digital trust tour in June. I'm going to be traveling the US. I'm busy.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to come chat
Yes.
with me on my lowly podcast. But no, this was awesome, super insightful, and can't wait to see the finished product. Thank you for joining.
Yes, always a pleasure hanging out with you, Daniel. Thank you so much.
Thank you for checking out this episode of You Should Talk To. This show is brought to you by the company with the same name, You Should Talk To, a company that helps marketing leaders find the right agency or freelancer for their situation. If you enjoyed what you learned in this episode, make sure to follow You Should Talk To wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, or visit YouShouldTalkTo.com for more information.